In this video, we are going to talk about how to prepare your pet for any emergency situation. If you're like me and you have a pet that you love and you know that you want to keep them safe just like the rest of your family, this video is really going to help you get started. We're going to talk about the 5 categories I think about when I think about pet preparedness. We're going to talk about some simple strategies you can use to stay organized, and we're going to cover the 3 biggest mistakes that pet owners make that could put their pets at risk during an emergency situation. Getting your pet prepared may not be something that was at the top of your list when you started thinking about prepping, but if you love your pets, and I am sure that you do, you are going to want to think about how to get them prepared for emergency situations. Do me a favor really quickly, drop your favorite pet emergency tip below so we can all learn best practices from people maybe who have gone through emergency situations before. The easiest way to do this is just to break down pet preparedness, just like we did break down our own, into 5 simple categories. We're going to think about pet prepping in terms of water, food, health and safety, sanitation, and comfort. If you think about pet prepping in those terms, it's going to be really simple to think about what you need to do to get any of your pets ready for emergency situations. Here's my little disclaimer. I have a dog, so a lot of the things that you see here are going to be focused on prepping with a dog, but I will try to highlight some things for cats. If you have other kinds of pets, again, just use these 5 categories and think about what you would need to take with you to keep any of your pets safe. I don't want this to be dog exclusive. The first thing we're going to think about is just water. Again, we know hydration is so important, not only for ourselves, but for our pets. The general rule of thumb when you are thinking about water storage for your pet is to have 1 ounce of water for every 1 pound for your dog. For a cat, you want to store 4 ounces of water for every 5 pounds, so just a little bit less than that 1 pound per ounce. When you're thinking about water storage, it's going to be kind of in 2 parts. The first part is, what do I need to get out of my house and be able to get my animal water for the first few hours or maybe day or 2? And then what do I need to store in my house if there was a longer term emergency situation? You'll see here I have some water bottles kind of set aside. That is water just for a couple of days for my dog. It would get us to our emergency locations if we had to leave our house in an emergency. We'll talk about emergency bins here just in a minute. The second category is just food. Your animals are going to want to eat just like you are. So it's really important to store the food that they are used to. In a stressful situation, you don't want to be introducing a new diet to your animals. I know my dog in particular does not do well when we stitch up his diet. I know a lot of animals are similar. We use Science Diet, and we have just a small bag that we keep with us in our emergency bin that we would be able to feed him for 3 or 4 days out of this bag with no problem. This again just gets me out of the local emergency area and allows me to find food. We do also store extra food for him for a longer emergency situation if we were staying here in place. If you store wet food for your animal, make sure you store a can opener. You don't want to get someplace with grab and go food or canned food where you don't have a way to open the cans. The third one is just health. When we think about evacuating with our pets, we want to think about everything we can do to keep them healthy. The first thing I would recommend is just having a pet first aid kit. This is a great add to an emergency bin so that if your pet is injured in an emergency situation, you have the ability to patch things up. You also want to think about things like medicine. If your animals are on any kinds of medicine, you're going to want to think about having extra at the house, maybe a 30-day supply, so that you can continue to give your animal the medicine that they need to stay comfortable and healthy. As part of that health and safety discussion, you're also going to want to have a copy of your last vet record. This is just going to be information on the shots that your animals have had and whether or not they are current on all their vaccinations. That's going to be really important if you need to evacuate your house and try to go to a shelter, or if you have to go somewhere where maybe you don't have access to your regular vet. Having just a paper copy of those records is going to make treatment for your animals so much easier in an emergency situation. The fourth thing is sanitation, and I don't think about sanitation a lot day to day. I let my dog out in the backyard, he does his business, and that's kind of the end of it. In an emergency situation, think a big weather event. It may not be practical to let your dog go outside, so you may want to think about other sanitation means. If you own a cat, you may want to pack an extra small kitty litter box and some kitty litter so that they have a a place to go if they don't have their normal litter box or they can't go outside. Again, for dogs, having these dog pads could be really useful, and having extra poop bags is useful, again, so that you can clean up after your pet and meet any kind of sanitation requirements. Again, particularly important if you're going somewhere like a shelter or staying at a hotel, having a way to take care of sanitation is going to be super important. And then the last category is just comfort. These are the things that are going to make your pet feel more comfortable or secure in an emergency situation. So when you're thinking about comfort, if there is a particular bed or a toy that your animal absolutely loves, make sure you think about putting that on your emergency get out of your house kit. So you may be thinking, that's great, Laura, but that's a lot of stuff. I don't think I'm that organized. I don't know what to grab. It feels a little overwhelming. Well, that's okay, because we're going to talk about how you stay organized for your pet. The first thing is just building a grab and go bin. I've already referenced it a couple of times in this video. No kidding, my grab and go bin is in a Tupperware bin. Everything that you see on the table just stays in this. I put some bottled water in there so I know I have water. I keep a little bag of food. Another useful thing for both water and food in your emergency kind of grab and go kit is just having collapsible bowls. These are super popular. You may already have some laying around the house. They're also great for packing an emergency bin because they fold completely flat and they just don't take up a lot of room. So that is my favorite kind of hack for food and water. When we're thinking about the kind of health and safety piece, there is one thing that I add in my emergency bin for Rocket. So we live in Colorado. He mostly is a backyard dog. He's 11 years old. He pretty much chills in the house all the time. That is his favorite place. So he doesn't get out and about a lot, which means he's not exposed to fleas and ticks. We also just don't have a lot of fleas and ticks in the part of Colorado where I am, unless you go up into the mountains and you do a lot of hiking. So we don't keep him on flea and tick medicine daily because it's just not required where we live. However, I do have some flea and tick medicine in his grab and go bin, and I would use that if we were going someplace where maybe there's a lot more fleas or a lot more ticks, or he's going to be outside a lot more. You may start thinking through situations where you realize there is something else that you need for your pet in an evacuation situation that you don't normally use in your day-to-day house, and that is okay. Another thing to think about when we are doing health and safety is just having a kennel or a crate or some kind of carrier for our animals. If you have to evacuate quickly and you need to get out of the house and get somewhere where maybe animals aren't really particularly always welcome, like let's say a hotel or a shelter, having a crate or a kennel could be really important, not only from a comfort perspective for your animal, but also because if you are evacuating someplace, you may need to have your animals kenneled or put in some kind of carrier so that they are protected. Leads me into this next section, which is the 3 biggest mistakes that people make in terms of preparing their pet for emergencies. I'm always a little surprised when I hear people who don't have their animals microchipped, and I know kind of depending on your situation, maybe you feel like you don't need it. I would encourage you, as someone who is preparing for any emergency, that you microchip your pet. It's relatively affordable. It's pretty simple. It's a one-time thing. So I use a company called Home Again. They send a nice little card with all of your pet's information to include the microchip number and a picture of your animal, your little ID tag that a lot of people put on collars. Drives my dog crazy, so we just leave it in the little pouch here. But I put this in our emergency bin, and that way I always know where to find his chip information. The second mistake that I see a lot of pet owners make is really just not thinking through evacuation plans with their pets. So it's one thing if we are sheltering in place and staying at home, again, you can have your pets where you always keep them and it's not going to be a big deal. But if you have to leave your house for an emergency situation, knowing places that you can go that will allow you to bring your pets is really important. So think through the plan of where you would take your animals. Another thing to consider, if you are evacuating your home for a storm, think hurricane or something like that, chances are there's going to be a lot of other people evacuating as well. You want to know hotels on your route that will allow you to keep your pets with you. And then the last mistake that I see people making in emergency situations is just not knowing who to call if they are separated from their pet. Your animals are likely going to try to get home. So having the number for a few of your neighbors could also be a really important tip to have, just so if your animal wanders back home and is outside your house, maybe your neighbors have seen them or can grab them and take care of them for you. Here's the good news. If you've done what I've asked you to and you've microchipped your pet, that means when you start calling local vets, the Humane Society, shelters, they're going to be able to tell you whether or not your animal is there. If you start having to just describe your animal, sometimes that can get a little bit trickier. That goes back to kind of a discussion we had when we talked about emergency binders, which is please make sure that you have a current picture with you and your pet so that if you have to go somewhere and prove ownership, if you will, you have a picture of you and your pet. That just makes it easier for the place to identify your pet, to identify you, and to know, hey, this really is the owner that I'm about to hand the animal over to. Super important. Hopefully that was useful. I'm dropping a link below again for a few of these items that I have that I think are really important. I hope it helps. If you haven't done so already, hit like, hit subscribe. I would love for you to be on this journey with me. And as always, my friends, we are prepared and not scared.